An 8-year-old boy in an oversized janitor uniform just walked into the 48th floor executive suite alone. He is here to mop floors for his grandma, who is fighting for her life across town. What the iron-willed CEO does next will open an entire corporation and mend 3 broken hearts. Stay with me, because the twist that is coming will remind you why love has no expiration date. Teddy Wilson's small fingers trembled as he pressed the call button for the express elevator. He'd never been inside a skyscraper, let alone one with gold-tinted glass that shimmered like a lighthouse against Chicago's icy night. But Grandma Rose always said, when fear talks loud, Teddy, let love talk louder. So he swallowed hard, adjusted the drooping janitor's cap over his sandy curls, and stepped into the elevator when the door sighed open. 40th floor, he thought, remembering the number scrawled on Rose's folded schedule. The panel stretched above his head like a glimmering wall of secrets. He used both thumbs to poke the button marked 40, a soft chime answered, and the carriage began its silent ascent, lifting him past floors of sleeping servers and cubicles dimmed for the weekend. He clutched the satchel Grandma kept in the closet rags, an ancient spray bottle of homemade cleaner, a flashlight, and, tucked in the inner pocket, a crinkled plastic bag containing 3 oatmeal cookies. Dinner if he got hungry. Outside, January winds rattled against the glass. Inside, the elevator played muffled big band music, as though someone in corporate thought nostalgia might make late-night maintenance feel lighter. Teddy's small chest rose and fell. He imagined Rose in a hospital gown. Maybe cold, maybe scared. The doctor had said she'd broken her hip. Overnight for observation, he'd told Teddy's worried neighbor Mrs. Patel, who'd driven them to the R. Overnight might turn into longer. And if Rose missed another shift, Ms. Dolan from payroll would dock her pay. They wouldn't risk that. Rent was due in 12 days. The elevator eased to a stop. Ding. The doors parted, revealing a hushed corridor lined with slate walls and a plush steel blue carpet that looked too soft for shoe soles, let alone mop wheels. Recessed lighting cast a glow that felt more like a gallery than an office. At the far end, double glass doors bore frosted letters Grace Whitaker, CEO. Teddy exhaled. This was it. He pushed the doors. They gave without resistance. The office felt enormous, as wide as Grandma's entire apartment floor. He guessed framed by windows that turned the city into a twinkling quilt beneath the moon. Desks stood vacant, chairs tucked in, computers asleep. The only sound was the low hum of the. He found the supply closet first, exactly where Rose's hand-drawn map said it would be. Across from the break area, balanced on tiptoe, he reached the light switch. Fluorescence flickered, revealing shelves of industrial cleaners, microfiber cloths, and neatly lashed mops. It smelled of lemon and distant bleach, a scent Teddy associated with Rose's hugs after a shift. He chose the smallest mop, filled a bucket at the sink, and rolled it toward the executive suites. Wheels squeaked on carpet seams, breaking the hush, but no alarms blared, no adults shouted. Grandma always started with the CEO's desk, he remembered. She said the big bosses were the same as everyone else. They spilled coffee, dropped crumbs, left smudges on their screens. They just forget anyone sees them. She whispered once, her voice more amused than resentful. We read the quiet eyes that keep dignity polished. Teddy rounded a corner and halted. The CEO's office was nothing like he pictured. It was more like a living room perched in the clouds. A charcoal sofa faced a fireplace flickering behind glass. Built-in bookshelves held first editions and framed black and white photos. A little girl on horseback, a Navy officer saluting, a teenage ballerina mid-leap. The massive desk sat near the window. Grainy walnut slab atop black steel legs. A single lamp burned, casting a warm oval over scattered folders. He pulled the cap lower, lifted the spray bottle, and, with tiny determined steps, approached the desk. 1 spritz, 2 spritzes. Rose always said use gentle circles, no streaks. He wiped the rag, leaving dark swaths in the dust that surprised him. Even fancy people forget to clean, he mused. Teddy's confidence grew. Desk first, then the conference table, then the floor. He rehearsed Rose's pattern in his mind like a bedtime story. But when he reached to move a crystal paperweight shaped like a globe, his elbow nudged a ceramic mug. It toppled. Cold coffee flooded the polished wood, gathering speed toward an open leather folio full of color-coded charts. Oh no, 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 Teddy gasped. He dropped the rag, lunged, and slapped his tiny palm over the stream, but liquid had already soaked the folio edge. Behind him, a woman's voice sliced the silence. Step back, sweetheart. Teddy froze. He spun around to find a tall, angular woman in a navy overcoat. Hair swept in a silver-streaked hegnon, eyes the color of winter lake water. She looked like the statues in city parks, elegant, unmoving except her right eyebrow arched. Equal parts concern and command. Sorry, he stammered. She strode forward, shrugging off the coat to reveal a charcoal suit, reached for a box of tissues on the credenza, and began blotting the coffee. It is just paper, she said, voice low, crisp, and apparently a little caffeine. The charts didn't he ask for? Teddy stepped back. His breathing turned shallow. Grandma would lose her job. They might lose the apartment. His throat tightened. The woman tossed damp tissues into the trash, then crouched until her gaze met his. I am Grace, she said softly. You look terrified. I am Teddy. I am covering Grandma's shift. He squeezed the rag in both fists. She fell on the ice tonight. They put her in the hospital. She can miss work. Grace's features softened, lines around her mouth relaxing. Rose Wilson is your grandmother. He nodded. She has been with us 10 years, Grace murmured almost to herself. Keeps this floor dotted on perfect. She studied him. How old are you? 8, 9 in April. You rode here alone? He managed to shake yes. Grace exhaled a small breath of awe. Well, Teddy Wilson, she said, rising. Let us take care of that mess together, then see about your grandma. They wiped the desk clean. Grace showed him a hidden drawer with spare microfiber cloths Rose had apparently stashed. Your grandma thinks ahead, she noted, admiration warming her tone. When they finished, Grace flicked off the desk lamp. A hush settled. Do you like hot chocolate? Teddy's eyes widened. The real kind? With marshmallows? I think the executive pantry has everything short of a marshmallow farm. She replied, follow me. She led him past offices to a sleek kitchen, stainless steel appliances, rows of artisan teas, and an espresso machine that looked like a spaceship. Teddy perched on a leather stool while Grace steamed milk in a small copper pot, something she clearly hadn't done often, judging by the concentrated furrow between her brows. 2 minutes later, she slid a mug toward him. Mini marshmallows bobbed beneath a froth cap. He wrapped his fingers around the porcelain, heat seeped into his chilled palms. Thank you, he whispered. Grace poured herself coffee. They sipped in silence until Teddy gathered courage. Will Grandma get fired? Grace shook her head. Absolutely not. But Ms. Dolan said. I sign Ms. Dolan's paycheck, Grace interrupted gently. Rose's job is safe. Teddy's shoulders dropped an inch. Tears he deep in bottling traced silent pats down his cheeks. He sniffled, embarrassed. Grace slid a box of tissues across. Nothing wrong with tears. They water courage. That sounded like something Rose might say. Grace angled her head. Does Rose have anyone with her at the hospital? Just me earlier and Mrs. Patel, a neighbor. Visiting hours are over now. Grace checked her watch. 11:14 p.m. We'll visit first thing, she promised. For tonight I am driving you home. He hesitated. I still need to mop. She smiled, small but genuine. I'll cover that detail. One night. Executive carpets can survive. Teddy almost laughed. Okay. They rode the elevator down together. Grace held the mop bucket, surprising him. In the lobby, security guard Malik looked up from his desk, startled. Ms. Whitaker, evening. Everything okay? Better than okay, thanks to my new associate, Grace said, nodding at Teddy. Malik grinned, giving Teddy a covert thumbs up. Outside, Grace's driver, Jonah, double-parked the town car. Snowflakes spiraled under street lamps. Teddy slid across buttery leather seats, the city lights whizzing past like falling stars. Grace asked about his school, favorite books. He adored space stories, and his dog-eared comic about inventor heroes. He asked if being CEO was scary. She admitted some days were, especially days without true friends. Teddy said earnestly, maybe you could be my friend. Grace blinked, something glassy flickering in her eyes. I'd like that. The car stopped outside a brick walk-up in Logan Square. Grace escorted him to the door, waited while he fumbled the key. Mrs. Patel cracked open her apartment door across the hall. Sorry, hem rustling. When she spotted Grace, her eyebrows almost reached her hairline. Grace offered a business card. I'll check on Teddy in the morning. Inside the small unit, Teddy tiptoed past Rose's empty recliner, past the folded knitting blanket. He turned to see Grace still at the threshold. Thank you, he said. Grace crouched again, smoothing her suit skirt. Sleep. Tomorrow we'll see Rose together. He nodded. She stood, offered a final reassuring nod to Mrs. Patel and left. As the car pulled away, Grace leaned back, mind flooded with images of boy mopping in Owen View office. Coffee spilling, panic in his childish eyes, fierce love etched across his small face. She felt something shift like a gear long rusted, now turning free. A thought surfaced, clear as the lake on a windless dawn. I am responsible for more than profit margins. In Teddy's apartment, moonlight pooled on the carpet. He placed the remaining marshmallow from his pocket beside Rose's recliner. She loved sweets. Then he knelt by the window, whispered a prayer for her hip to heal, for jobs to stay, for the nice CEO who made hot cocoa and called him friend. Somewhere in the weave of city sounds, distant sirens, a train's lonely horn, Teddy swore he heard Grandma's boy saying, love talks louder. He climbed into bed, pulled covers to his chin, and, for the first time since the fall, allowed himself to hope. Back at Whitaker Tower, Grace rode the elevator to her penthouse apartment atop the building. City lights stretched like constellations beneath her. She poured a glass of water, but instead of heading to her desk full of urgent emails, she opened a leather journal she hadn't touched in years. Date January 9. Entry tonight. I met bravery in the form of an 8-year-old boy named Teddy Wilson. He reminded me that humanity mops quietly when no one is watching and still shines. She paused, pen hovering. She wasn't sure what tomorrow's board briefing held. Earnings projections, looming layoffs, the usual. But tonight, priorities rearranged themselves. Somewhere a grandmother healed, a child slapped, and maybe, if Grace played her cards right, Life could be about more than quarterly victories. She capped the pen, set down the journal, and turned off the light. In the darkness, the skyline blinked on, off, on like a giant Morse code message only the awake could interpret. To Grace Whittaker it translated simply begin again. She whispered it aloud, an intent, a promise. Begin again. And somewhere across town, Teddy dreamed of polished hallways in the clouds and a lady who said tears water courage. In the dream, Grandma Rose walked those halls, hip unbroken, voice laughing like a bell. He reached for her hand, she squeezed back, strong as ever. Outside the hospital, snow kept falling soft, steady, forgiving blanketing streets, muffling worries, and setting the stage for morning's first light. When a wounded hip, a lonely CEO, and an 8-year-old janitor would begin weaving a story none of them could have imagined the night before. But for now, city and souls alike rested, held together by threads of unexpected kindness and by the simple truth that sometimes the smallest visitor in the grandest office can open the tallest heart. Rose Wilson awoke to the rhythmic beep-beep of the heart monitor and the smell of disinfectant that clung to everything in St. Catherine's orthopedic wing. Pale gray morning light filtered through Venetian blinds, striping her blanket like the keys of a player piano. Her left hip throbbed a dull, insistent ache, but it was the sudden memory of Teddy alone in their apartment that made her breath hitch. She tried to shift, winced, and gave up. Moving would take help. And the nurses were changing shifts right now. Instead, she closed her eyes and pictured her grandson's freckled face, the cowlick he hated, the lopsided grin that never failed to soothe her. Lord, she whispered, the word barely there, hold that boy tight until I get back. A rustle came from the doorway. Sister Joan, the hospitalist geriatric care volunteer, pushed a cart stacked with books and pastel writing paper. The nunn's habit fluttered like a seabird's wings each time she stopped to check on a patient. She paused at Rose's bed, eyes crinkling above a powder blue mask. Good morning, Ms. Wilson. Thought you might enjoy a little stationery today. Rose managed a crooked smile. Stationery. Haven't written a letter in years. Then today's perfect. Sister Joan set down a bundle, 3 sheets of cream linen paper, a matching envelope, and a fountain pen with a brass clip. Sometimes what the body can get up and do, the heart can kneel down and say. With that, she was gone, cartwheel squeaking down the corridor. The monitor beeped, the radiator hissed, and Rose, 71 years worn and stitched with stories, stared at that blank paper like it held a secret door. She lifted the pen, her fingers were stiff but determined, the same way they'd been 30 years ago repairing a waitress's broken heel between dinner shifts, or 15 years ago braiding her daughter's hair for the last time before addiction carried the girl out of their lives. She uncapped the pen, breathed the faint scent of ink, and began. Dear Teddy, if you rereading this, it means I am still stuck in this silly bed, and you probably chomping at the bit to make sure I am taking my medicine. Yes, baby, I am minding the nurses. They bossier than I ever was. I don't know if Mrs. Patel has told you yet, but the surgeon says my hip needs a metal plate, and that means a slower dance back home than either of us would like. 5 to 7 days, they say. We've waited longer for bus transfers. Haven't we? I am writing because sometimes love needs paper shoes to walk across a room, and because I don't want the worry lines on that sweet forehead of yours to deepen 1 millimeter more. First order of business, your rent money is safe. I squirreled away enough for 2 months in the cookie jar behind the cereal boxes. If it is still just crumbs, I trust you to find it. Use the step stool, no gymnastics. Second the job, Miss. Dollin can make all the threats she wants. Grace Whittaker herself will not let me go. I know this the way I know you will leave socks on the couch absolutely and forever. Now third and most important, you remember the rules. 1. Before you get on any bus, say the driver's name. A person who hears his name remembers you. 2. If you feel a lie creeping up your throat, swallow it with a gulp of truth. It is bitter at first and sweet after. 3. When people show you their worst, show them your hand. Palm up. Nobody can swing a fist while holding a hand, Teddy. I miss you fierce. Be brave but not fearless. Fear tells us we're still alive. Love louder, like we say, and keep my chair warm. I'll be home for our Saturday cartoons. One way or another. You're forever. Grandma Rose. She dotted the last period and let the pen hover, then sketched a tiny broomstick and bucket beneath her signature. Teddy would laugh at that. A tear dotted the margin. She left it to dry, let him see the proof. The ward door swung open again, this time revealing Grace Whittaker in a camel chair coat. Her gray flecked bun loosened by lakefront winds. She carried a white paper sack and a single red tulip in a slim glass vial. The contrast of corporate chic and garden tenderness struck Rose as almost funny, but her laughter aborted into a cough. Grace hurried forward, concern etching faint grooves between her brows. Ms. Wilson Rose, how is the pain? Pain behaves when you bring tulips, Rose rasped, and when the boss herself shows up before sunrise. Grace set down the sack and placed the tulip on the bedside table. I couldn't sleep. Figured hospital coffee needed reinforcements. She produced 2 cups from the bag, one labeled R and the other G, along with a small container of honey. Cafeteria brew with a bribe of local honey. Doctor said you can have caffeine in moderation. Rose chuckled. Doctor apparently never met a night shift janitor. Grace settled into the vinyl chair, crossing one ankle over a perfectly pressed trouser leg. Yet her posture wan boardroom crisp it sagged, as if she'd exhaled days of meetings the second she entered this room. They sipped. After a moment, Rose tapped the envelope, writing to Teddy. Boy needs assurances. I saw him home last night, Grace said, eyes softening. Made sure he got inside. I figured. Rose watched steam curl from Grace's cup. Child said you made him cocoa with marshmallows. That true? My first attempt at hot chocolate since college. He was polite about the lumps. Rose's laugh escaped in a wheeze. The monitor responded with a stutter, and Grace shot upright. I'm okay, Rose waved her off. Just getting old. Comes with sound effects. They drank in companionable silence until Grace reached into her coat and retrieved a folded letterhead. I drafted a temporary leave request for you, full pay, benefits intact. Her will need your signature once you re-comfortable. Rose traced the corporate emblem Whitaker Enterprises, a stylized W that resembled wings, full pay. You've earned more than that. Grace paused, something vulnerable flickering. I also wanted to thank you. Thank me. For raising a boy brave enough to walk into my life and remind me what humanity looks like. Rose's eyes misted. She cleared her throat. If that boy walked into your office, it is because I tripped outside it. Don't give me halos. Maybe stumbles make saints, Grace said quietly. Or at least teachers. The room hummed. Monitor, radiator, the low swirl of January wind against the window. Grace leaned forward, elbows on knees. Do you need anything? A phone charger? Different pillow, priest, Netflix password? Rose smiled. Just peace of mind. And maybe you answering one question. Anything. Why are you really here? Eos don't usually chase mop buckets. Grace studied her hands, the manicure chipped at the corners. I lost my mother last spring. Stroke. Sudden, she inhaled. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Work came first, at least in my head. Funeral woke me up too late. Rose placed a hand over Grace's. I am sorry. Grace nodded, jaw lynching. Seeing Teddy in my office felt like my mother had marched him in there to shake me awake. She met Rose's gaze. I didn't want to miss another chance. Rose squeezed. Then Dante. A soft knock interrupted. Nurse Delgado entered, cheerful and brisk. Vitals check. Ladies, Miss Wilson, how is our pain scale? Somewhere between nosy neighbor and toothish, Rose quipped. Delgado laughed, took readings, adjusted Rose's stuff, then left with a promise of oatmeal in 20 minutes. Grace stood. I'll give you time to rest. I am sending housekeeping to sterilize this room top to bottom. Germs fear my payroll. Rose smirked. I'll be sure to tip them well. Before leaving, Grace touched the tulip's petals. Back this afternoon. Okay, and bring better cocoa. Rose watched her go, the hem of that camel coat swishing like a metronome. When the door latched, she exhaled a prayer of gratitude that felt heavier than the bag above her. She picked up the pen again. Dear Grace, you'll scold me for using my nurse colored energy on ink. But I've always believed truth sits easier on paper than in air. Thank you for loving my grandson last night. Your cocoa may have had lumps, but your kindness did not. I see the sorrow you carry like a concealed bruise. My Lily Tedious mother died of an overdose 5 years back. Guilt built a nest in my chest afterward. Some mornings, I still feed it crumbs of shawled have. Old have. But nights like last night remind me life is a string of new doors. You walk through one when you followed Teddy home. Don't be afraid to keep opening them. If you ever need a mother as here an old, wrinkled one, I am in room 5 up for the week. In Logan Square forever. With respect and hope. Rose. She tucked the letter beneath the coffee cup marked G. Painmates kicked and the edges of the world softened. She let herself drift while outside her window. Snowflakes attempted their brave descent against an indifferent skyline. Across town, Teddy woke to the smell of cinnamon toast. Mrs. Patel is stewing. He padded into the kitchen, hair wild, eyes blinking at daylight. Eat, Mrs. Patel instructed, sliding a plate his way. Then change. CEO lady will return at 10. Teddy's heart hopped like a frog in his chest. Grace Whitaker. She'd promised to take him to the hospital today. He wolfed down toast, washed his face, combed his hair more swirl than part, and put on his best polo, the one Grandma called his church shirt, even though they'd only stepped inside a sanctuary twice. At 9:52, a knock sounded. Teddy dashed to the door, yanked it open. Grace stood there in dark jeans, sneakers, and a wool scarf the color of butter mints. She smiled. Morning, partner. He grabbed his winter coat. Let us go see Grandma. In the elevator, he eyed a white box tied with teal ribbon in her hands. Strawberry scones, she said. Nurse Delgado Intel says your grandma can't resist them. Back at St. Catherine's, Rose stirred awake as Teddy burst in. Grandma. She reached for him. Pain shot up her hip, but joy dulled it. He climbed carefully onto the mattress's edge. Grace entered next, raising the box. Carbs incoming. As they ate, Rose pinching off tiny bites, Teddy devouring halves, Grace discovered the envelope with her initial. She unfolded it, eyes flicking over Rose's looping script. By the time she reached the end, the CEO's eyes shimmered. She folded the letter, slipped it into her coat pocket over her heart. "Thank you," she murmured. Rose just nodded. The day drifted in soft conversation, nurse visits, and the comfortable silence of people who don't need noise to feel close. Teddy-colored superheroes on hospital menus. Grace read aloud from the Chicago Tribune as human interest section. Rose dozed. At dusk, Grace prepared to leave. She bent over Rose. "Anything else?" "Keep him safe," Rose whispered, nodding at Teddy asleep in the chair, crayon still clutched. "With my life," Grace vowed. That night at Whitaker Tower, Grace sat alone in her office. Snow tapped the windows like shy knuckles. She reread Rose's letter, thumb brushing the paper as raised grain. Then she turned to her computer and drafted an email titled "New Child Care Policy Proposal, Emergency Support for Hourly Staff." Attachments: projected costs, face-in timeline, and a personal note to the board because no child should ride 2 buses at midnight to protect an investment portfolio. She hit send. Then she opened her private journal. Entry: Rose Wilson writes with the honesty of fresh wounds. "Today she offered to be my mother. I accepted without saying a word. Tomorrow I fight for her family as if it were my own." Grace closed the journal, turned off the light. Snow still fell thin. Determined, somewhere across the river, an 8-year-old dreamt of cocoa free of lumps. And in room 5, a grandmother slept soundly, knowing the world had tilted a little more toward mercy. 2 days later, Rose's recovery advanced quickly under Nurse Delgado's strict regime of stretches and scones. Teddy visited after school. Grace between meetings. On the 3rd night, Rose gathered enough strength to sit upright with minimal support. She requested her purse. From it, she pulled a stack of envelopes, each addressed in careful hand to people whose lives she'd swept around for a decade. Ms. Dolan, Malik the night guard, Jonah the driver, even Mr. Frederick in payroll whom she'd never met. They were thank you notes laced with little jokes, spiritual nuggets, and 1 or 2 gentle scoldings about littering gum wrappers. Teddy helped stamp them. Grace promised hand delivery. Before lights out, Rose scribbled one final letter. This time the envelope bore no name, only the words "to be opened when the day darkens." She sealed it with deliberate pressure, pressed it into Grace's palm. "For Teddy," she said, "if my clock runs out first." Grace swallowed the lump in her throat. "Your clock is just getting rewound." Still Rose insisted, "Promise." "I promise." Their eyes met, old grief echoing in both. Then the nurse ushered Grace and Teddy toward the door. Just before stepping out, Teddy turned, blew a kiss, and whispered, "Love louder." Rose repeated it back, "Love louder." The door clicked shut. Darkness settled, but Rose felt no fear. Her letters were written, her boy was guarded. She touched the tulip, now slightly drooping yet stubbornly red, and drifted into sleep, carried by inked words and the steadfast conviction that even hospital walls could not cage love's long reach. At home, Teddy brushed his teeth while Grace waited outside the bathroom. She'd insisted on staying the night in the guest room the landlord let Rose keep for storage. When Teddy emerged, he looked up. "Do grown-ups remember dreams?" "Sometimes. I dreamed Grandma was dancing. No cane." She twirled right in the hallway. Grace smiled. "Then let us make it happen." He nodded as if accepting a formal mission, then crawled into bed and was asleep before she finished tucking the quilt. Grace stood in the doorway, watching the rise and fall of small lungs, feeling the weight of the sealed envelope in her coat pocket. Her phone buzzed with board member replies, questions about cost, logistics, optics. She muted it. For now, there were more important letters to answer, those written in the cursive of human need. She whispered into the dark, echoing Teddy and Rose together, "Love louder." The radiator hissed its approval, and somewhere downtown, snowplows carved new paths under street lamps, clearing a route for the daybreak commute, clearing a route, too, for lives about to intersect in ways no corporate memo could forecast. Because words written from a hospital bed had begun to travel, hand to hand, heart to heart, rewriting policies, bridging griefs, and proving once more when the smallest voice picks up a pen, entire buildings can shift their foundations. End of chapter. Letters from a hospital bed. Rose Wilson's story did not begin on the wet pavement outside Whitaker Tower, nor in the hushed orthopedic wing of St. Catherine's, nor even in the cramped Logan Square apartment she now shared with Teddy. It began 62 years earlier in a shotgun house on Chicago's South Side, where a restless little girl listened to the rattle overhead and imagined every screeching brake was a train whistle to someplace wide and bright. Back then her name was Rosie May Walker May. After the month she appeared, shrieking, in a kitchen where her mother was canning peaches. Rosie May learned early that dreams were lighter than rent money, but that didn't stop her from collecting them. She loved three things with equal ferocity: the upright piano her grandfather rescued from a tavern fire, the smell of new library books, and the crackle of her mother's fried chicken. By 14, she could sight read Chopin and biscuits simultaneously, left hand spinning carpeggios, right hand flipping dough in the cast iron skillet. Church ladies swore she had angels in her fingers. A high school music teacher agreed and, in her senior year, helped Rosie land a partial scholarship to the Chicago Conservatory. The letter arrived on a Monday. Rosie tucked it into her hymnal, finished exams, and the next day her father suffered a stroke behind the city bus steering wheel he'd driven for 22 years. He lived, but half of him slept from then on. The scholarship went unclaimed. Rosie traded scales for shifts, first at Woolworth's, then the night desk at the Palmer House, where tourists mistook her for the concierge because she spoke without slang. That was where she met Derek Wilson, a bellhop from Memphis with a baritone laugh and the kind of eyes that make a woman think redemption comes in denim jackets. They married 6 months later in a courthouse ceremony paid for with tip money. Rosie traded Rosie for Rose, traded piano benches for twins left too long in cribs, while Derek chased smoke-filled bar gigs. By 25, she had 2 girls, Lily and Iris, a mortgage sliding toward foreclosure, and a husband who believed promises turned to ash faster than cigarettes. When Iris was 3, Derek left a note on the fridge: gone to Nashville. Dante weighed up. He never came back. Rose sold her grandmother's brooch, paid the overdue gas bill, and accepted that some men were smoke themselves visible, breathable but impossible to hold. She went back to music for solace, teaching cheap lessons in a church basement while cleaning office buildings at dawn. Her daughters grew tall and wild. Iris loved math, Lily loved risk. In 8th grade, Lily shoplifted lipstick just to see if she could. In 10th, she met a boy with a Camaro and taste for pharmaceutical detours. The spiral began not a cliff dive but a slow tilt. Rose tried counselors, prayers, locked windows, midnight searches. She hid money in coffee cans, hoping to fund rehab. But addiction is clever, always finding the spare key. One February night, Lily stumbled home soaked in sweat. Rose watched her daughter's pupils flicker like dying bulbs. She called 911 again. The EMS recognized the address. In the ambulance, Lily gripped her mother's hand and roped, "I am sorry, Mama." They were the last words Rose ever heard from her. Lily died 48 hours later. Overdose. 25 years old, a month younger than Rose had been when Derek disappeared. Grief rearranges a body. For weeks Rose floated grocery aisle to subway seat to church pew, her own limbs foreign. Iris held the funeral parlor Kleenex box while Pastor Daniels read Psalm 23. Rose's grief did not spill, it simmered thick, silent, scalding. When the casserole stopped, Iris returned to her dorm, and Rose faced an apartment that smelled of Lily's mango shampoo. She nearly drowned in that scent. Then one night, sorting Lily's scattered papers, Rose discovered a pregnancy test positive, dated 2 weeks before Lily's final overdose. Ultrasound referrals lay beneath. A baby, the heartbeat Lily never told anyone about. Rose did not cry, she moved. She tracked medical records, questioned Lily's friends, and learned her daughter had skipped appointments, too ashamed, too high, too everything. But the fetus was still alive, the file said, until the lethal cocktail. A second, more lethal wave of grief rolled over Rose. Within it, a seed of fierce resolve took root. She would save someone even if Lily couldn't be saved. She would save Lily's son. At the edge of sorrow, Rose petitioned for custody the day after Teddy Wilson inhaled first air. The state foster agency balked at her age 63 then and her income 2 janitorial gigs. Piano lessons dwindled. Rose straightened her spine. She quoted statutory code she'd researched between shifts, produced neighbors' affidavits, letters from Iris, and a notarized statement from Pastor Daniels promising community support. 3 weeks later, the judge banged his gavel. Temporary custody granted. 6 months after that, permanent. The day she carried 8-pound Teddy out of the courthouse, winter sun bounced off fresh snow. Blinding and pure, she whispered over his newborn fuzz, "We begin again." Present-day Logan Square. Now, in the hospital bed, Rose folded memories like laundry creases sharp, corners aligned, tucking them into mental drawers so Teddy wouldn't see how frayed they were. But memories have a way of spilling. Nurse Delgado approached with a walker. Physical therapy round 2, Ms. Wilson, ready to tango? Rose gripped the handles, letting scar knots in her palms burn from boiling water at 15. Paper cutter slice at 40 remind her that body pain was old news. Hip pain stabbed as she stood, she hissed through clenched teeth. Slow, Delgado warned, flex those quads. Rose shuffled 5 steps, paused, then 5 more. Each move jarred a different memory. Lily's baby teeth, Iris's graduation tassel, the hush of Whitaker Tower's marble lobby at 3 a.m. She gritted through another lap before Delgado steered her back. Progress, the nurse declared. Keep it up and you'll headline the Nutcracker next Christmas. Rose chuckled, only if half the notes are flat. Delgado left, and Rose eased into bed. She noticed her tulip's petals browning. Time for a new bloom, she thought. An unsealed file. 6 floors above, Grace Whitaker sat in a hospital conference room combing through her archives. Faye from payroll had emailed at Dawn staff origin files confidential. She should have been in a strategy meeting downtown. Instead, she scrawled through scans of yellowed job applications. There it was: Rose Wilson, hire date 2012, previous employer Prime Clean Solutions, 1996-2012, emergency contact Lily Wilson, daughter, skills operates floor buffer, types 55 woman, plays piano. Grace blinked. Piano. She clicked on a supplementary PF internal commendations. One from 2017 by facilities manager Jorge Ramirez. Ms. Wilson voluntarily played company lobby piano during holiday open house when hired entertainer was late. Guests commented her rendition of Oh Holy Night rivaled concert halls. Grace let out a breath. She herself had been at that open house, shaking investor hands, oblivious to the pianist. Why hadn't he here flagged Rose for the company's new arts initiative? Why did their janitor still mop at 4 a.m. while lobby entertainment budgets ballooned? Fury mixed with shame. Another click opened Rose's initial background check. Grace froze under references. A name leapt out: Margaret Whitaker, relation, former employer. That was Grace's late mother. Heart racing, she skimmed the attached letter. To whom it may concern, I recommend Rose Wilson without reservation. She served as caretaker for my elderly parents in 1998, showing skill and compassion during my father's final weeks. Margaret Whitaker, 2000. Grace's chair tipped as she stood. Rose had nursed her grandfather. She pressed palms to her temples, memories rearranging. 10-year-old Grace sneaking cookies to her grandpa Alistair's room, sometimes finding a kind woman humming hymns while changing his bedding. She never realized that caretaker and her night janitor were the same. With shaking hands, she closed the laptop. Room 5, late afternoon. Rose's lunch tray sat untouched, lukewarm broth, gelatin trembling. She was penciling staff thank you notes when a gentle knock preceded Grace's entrance. The CEO carried a new tulip yellow, this time in a small Bluetooth speaker. Thought you might like a pop of color, Grace said, arranging the flower. And maybe a little tune. She tapped her phone. A piano prelude filled the room. Debussy's Clair de Lune. Rose's eyes brightened. Lovely, she breathed. Grace paused the music. Rose, she began, taking the chair. I discovered something today. She explained the caretaker connection. The letter. Rose listened quietly. I remember your mother, Rose said at last. She had peppermint tea every afternoon. Your granddad liked Glenn Miller. We played In the Mood to get him smiling. Grace's throat tightened. Why didn't you say anything when we hired you? Rose shrugged, wincing. Didn't he seem relevant? Payslip as a payslip. She folded her hands. Your mother sent me $500 after he passed. That bridge money kept me afloat. Grace blinked through mist. And we repaid you with mop buckets. You repaid me with work, dignity, Rose corrected, and lately strawberry scones. Silence rippled, pregnant with history. Tell me about Lily, Grace asked softly. Rose's fingers traced the blanket seam. She danced before she walked. Olin T, keep that girl still. She recounted the rebellious teen, the overdose, Teddy's birth, the courtroom fight. Grace listened, tears silent. When Rose finished, they sat in shared hush, the Bluetooth speaker still glinting lullabies. The twist of connection. Grace finally spoke. Do you remember a girl hiding under the hospice bed, eating Rose? Rose's brow furrowed, then smoothed. Little Grace with pigtail ribbons. You drew me pictures, spaceships and giants. Grace laughed, watery. Giants, yes. She reached out, covered Rose's weathered hand with her own manicured one. You comforted me while Dad was dying. I never forgot the lullaby you hummed. Rose squeezed back. We never know whose life we're rebraiding with our own. Grace inhaled, determination firing. I won't let your gift go unseen any longer. What do you mean? Rose asked. You'll see, Grace answered, standing. Whitaker Tower, the shadow side of nostalgia. Grace returned uptown, mind blazing. She convened facilities, tour and pure leads at 6 p.m. sharp. The agenda: 1. Rose Wilson's reassignment. 2. Heritage storytelling campaign. In the boardroom, skeptics fidgeted. Grace clicked to slide 1. Rose at a holiday lobby piano. Slide 2. Rose's caregiver letter signed by Margaret Whitaker. Slide 3. Teddy mopping at midnight. Mrs. Wilson exemplifies every core value on our website, Grace declared. Yet she is cleaning grout while outside firms collect $10,000 to play cocktail jazz in our lobby. From this hour forward, Rose is officially artist in residence. She laid out a part-time salaried role, daily piano sets in the lobby, mentorship program with local music students, flexible scheduling for her recovery, and shot up budget concerns, liability, optics. Grace waved them down. If we can budget artisan water in conference rooms, we can budget purpose. The motion passed unanimous after Grace's narrowed eyes met each vote. The letter opener. That night, Grace sat on her penthouse balcony, city lights smearing like wet paint. She opened Rose's sealed envelope for Teddy if the day darkens. Inside lay 3 items: a letter, a photograph of Lily holding newborn Teddy, and a dog-eared business card for the Chicago Conservatory labeled Deferred Dream. Grace read the letter. Sweet boy, if your grandma can finish this journey, remember every setback is a doorway. Mine was music school. I set my dream on a shelf. If you find this, promise you will take it down, dust it off, and chase your own. Music, science, pizza making, I don't care. Just chase it with both arms open. Love louder. Grandma Rose. Grace pressed the letter to her chest, eyes lifting to Orion's belt above the skyline. He will, she whispered. We'll make sure. Morning of release. 6 days after her fall, Rose signed discharge papers. A company van, Whitaker Enterprises emblazoned, arrived to escort her. Teddy and Grace waited curbside, Teddy bouncing on his toes. Inside the van, Rose found a wrap box. She opened it to an electronic keyboard, 88 weighted keys, pedal, headphones. For practice, Grace explained, until you read back on a Steinway. Rose tried to speak, tears choked her. Teddy dove across seats to hug her. Grace joined arms encircling them both, plowing through the past. At home, neighbors filled the hallway with well-hung-back cassercoles. Iris had flown in. Embracing her mother fiercely, Rose introduced Grace. Iris raised a skeptical brow, but a hug followed. Later, after casseroles cooled and guests left, Rose sat before her new keyboard. Teddy perched beside her, eyes like lanterns. She flexed fingers stiff from stiff lines, then began the old lullaby, Danny Boy. Notes trembled at first, then steadied. Down the hall, Iris leaned against the doorframe, tears free-falling. Grace, holding plates, froze, memory tunneling to her grandfather's hospice bed. One by one, neighbors peeked in. Mrs. Patel wiping eyes, Mr. Suarez tipping an imaginary hat. The narrow apartment pulsed with sound, with past and future braided right there. When Rose finished, silence lingered, soft and holy. She looked at Teddy, then Iris, then Grace. We begin again, she whispered. Teddy placed his small hand over hers. Love louder. For the first time since Lily's passing, Rose believed it was possible. Epilogue of the chapter. That night, after Teddy drifted to sleep, Rose sat alone at the keyboard. Hospital ID band still on her wrist. She played a chord, let it ring, then looked at the conservatory card propped on the music stand. She struck another chord, softer this time, as if answering her younger self across decades. In the living room, Grace and Iris whispered plans, daycare schedules, physiotherapy rides, Cartiston resident launch events. Laughter bubbled. Rose listened, heart swelling. The city beyond the window was the same one that had broken and mended her so many times. But tonight, its pulse felt different, like a metronome set to Mercy's tempo. She began to play Claire de Lune, the piece Grace loved, filling the apartment with moonlit water and second chances. The notes floated down the hallway, wrapped around laughter, seeped under Teddy's door, and drifted out the open window, joining the hum of traffic, the whistle of the L, the collective song of a city that never stopped moving. Across town, perhaps a child stirred, or a lonely executive paused mid-a-mail, feeling something unnamed brush her soul. Music works that way. Rose knew it, threads past into present, stranger into kin, janitor into artist, sorrow into hope. And so, the hidden past, no longer hidden, became the overture to everything that would follow: courtrooms, boardrooms, and a spring bench where love would make its loudest declaration yet. End of chapter. A janitor's hidden past. Grace Whitaker was awake before the sunrise, a habit she decultivated since her 20s, when ambition felt like caffeine and skyscraper boardroom seemed like the only altitude that mattered. Now 46, she still rose at 5, but the rush for conquest had dulled, replaced by a quieter ache she couldn't name, a mix of regret, loneliness, and a faint hope that maybe the world still had surprises left for her. That hope was new. It arrived the same night an 8-year-old janitor marched into her executive suite and politely demanded Windex. She stood at her penthouse window, mug warming her palms, watching Lake Michigan blush pink under dawn. Below, Whitaker Tower cut the skyline like a piece of onyx. For years she'd considered that building her legacy. This morning, it looked more like an empty trophy case. The kettle whistled. She poured more Earl Grey, added a spoon of honey, Rosa's suggestion, and checked her calendar. Today was stacked: a press briefing on Whitaker Enterprises earnings, a Labor Policy committee, and a Clay afternoon gala walkthrough at the Art Institute. Missing entirely from the digital squares was anything that mattered. No visit to Rose for physiotherapy check-in. No after-school cocoa with Teddy. Her assistant hadn't. He shrugged off personal items. Grace had. Calendars only reflected the priorities typed into them. She clicked the 3 p.m. slot, typed Rose, then 4:30 p.m. pick up Teddy. A simple act, but her chest loosened. As if some cosmic accountant approved the expense. Moment of interrupted routine. Her phone buzzed. Incoming call. Jonah Cabrera, driver, confidant, occasional co-conspirator in her midnight hot chocolate escapades. Morning, she answered. You schedule change? He asked, voice still scratchy with sleep. I see a south side address in dispatch. I'll explain on the way. 8 a.m., please. You got it, boss. He hung up. Grace felt a flutter, half nerves, half excitement. Jonah had driven her for 8 years. In that time, she'd learned he wore reading glasses at night, volunteered at a community boxing gym, and made the best empanadas in Cook County. But personal lines had stayed carefully drawn. Lately, though, those lines blurred like breath on cold glass. She didn't know what it meant, she only knew she no longer pretended she didn't enjoy it. Courtyard encounter. At 7:55, she descended to the lobby. Jonah waited inside the Lincoln, navy parka over his suit jacket. He hopped out to open her door. Winter air smelled of diesel and peppermint salt spread. You look bright-eyed, he noted as she settled into the back seat. I slept, she said, surprised it was true. We go into Logan Square first. He raised an eyebrow in the clear view but didn't press. As they joined rush hour traffic, Grace peered through tinted glass. Chicago slid by in layered cinematography, graffitied viaducts, corner Tamale carts, high-rises sparkling with mirrored arrogance. Somewhere in that montage lived people like Rose who mopped marble floors so others could see their reflections. You okay? Jonah asked at a red light. Grace met his gaze in the mirror, warm brown, steady. I am different, she admitted. Feels like I woke up in a softer world. Softer can be good, he said, and because the light stayed red, their eyes held a second longer than protocol allowed. She looked away first, heart tapping a Morse code she chose not to translate. Logan Square, apartment 3. Rose's unit was chaos-scented with cinnamon Iris flipping pancakes, Teddy practicing scales on the new keyboard, Mrs. Patel lecturing someone in Gujarati on the phone. When Grace knocked, the door flew open and Teddy bounded forward. She is walking with one crutch, he whispered as if revealing a magician's trick. Rose emerged, leaning on a polished wooden stick someone had carved with musical notes. Courtesy of Mr. Suarez, she explained, nodding to a neighbor waving from the hallway. Grace grinned. You look ready for a marathon. Half marathon, Rose corrected. Iris handed Grace a plate. Blueberry. She won't eat unless everyone does. Grace accepted, aware Jonah hovered politely at the threshold. Come in, she urged. Jonah hesitated. Chauffeurs weren't invited into executives' homes, but this one an executive's home. It was Rose's, and she'd already cleared space on the couch. Soon the driver sat beside Teddy, who peppered him with questions about horsepower and how many buttons were in a limousine. Iris eyed Jonah, then shot Grace a look that said, interesting choice. Grace felt a blush climb her neck. New role revealed. Over coffee, she shared the Cartiston-residence news. Rose's mouth fell open. Iris whooped. Teddy attempted a keyboard fanfare and landed on flat minor. Lobby set start in 2 weeks, Grace said. Flexible hours, full benefits, mentorship stipend. Rose's hand trembled. All I ever wanted was enough to keep the lights on. Now you all light the place for everyone else, Grace answered. Jonah leaned forward. We'll be coming to hear you. My sister plays cello, maybe a duet? Rose brightened. We all have a Whitaker Tower quartet in no time. As conversation blossomed, Grace noticed Jonah laughing with Iris, Teddy demonstrating a comic book Euro punch. The small living room felt stuffed with warmth the way her cavernous penthouse never had. Boardroom backlash. At 10:15, Grace reluctantly left for headquarters. In the backseat, her phone exploded with notifications. CFO Raymond Adler had scheduled an emergency executive committee at noon. Budget irregularities unsanctioned her expenditures. Irregularities meaning Rose's new position and the childcare fund she'd lobbied for overnight. The board had granted preliminary approval, but Adler loved procedure almost as much as he loved bonuses. Grace exhaled. Battle time, she muttered. You got armor? Jonah asked. She smirked. Better, I have truth. He nodded, merging lanes. Just before he pulled up to the curb, he met her eyes. For what it's worth, Grace, I think what you're redoing is exactly what this city needs. Something fluttered again, larger this time. She opened her mouth, found no words. So she nodded and stepped out. The door closed softly, but the echo of his voice trailed her into the lobby. The showdown. Conference room. Aurora featured glass walls and a steel table sized for Goliath. 5 execs waited, including Adler, hair slicked so severely it looked shellacked. He began without greeting. Our cash flow model cannot support discretionary positions born of sentimentality. Grace sat, hands folded. Define discretionary. Lobby pianist, emergency child care vouchers, and the so-called Cornerstone Scholarship you emailed at 2 a.m. The scholarship uses my bonus allocation, Grace said evenly. Your bonus is tied to shareholder approval, Adler snapped. Not my conscience. She slid a folder across. Here is the math. Retention cost of hourly staff has risen 28% in 3 years. The childcare stipend drops attrition by projected 17%, saving us $1.2 million net. Adler skimmed, mouth tightening. Even if the numbers check, optics matter. You rewriting corporate priorities on a humanitarian whim. Grace leaned forward. My mother founded this company on humanitarian whim, affordable housing projects, veteran scholarships. We lost that compass. I am setting it back. Silence swept the room. Finally, Harper cleared her throat. I move we pilot the childcare fund for 6 months and reassess. One by one, hands lifted. Adler's did not, but the motion carried. Grace logged the majority vote, then addressed the room. One more item, I'll personally match the first 6 scholarships. Meeting adjourned. Adler stormed out. Harper whispered, that was a masterclass. Grace merely sighed. Victory always tasted like adrenaline and exhaustion. Lifted gazes. As she exited, her phone pinged picture message from Jonah. It showed Teddy beside Rose's keyboard. Caption: future headliner at Carnegie Hall, watch the space. Grace laughed out loud, startling an intern. She typed back, might need a tour bus. Jonah responded with a thumbs up and a playful gif of a limousine sprouting wings. She pocketed the phone, smile lingering. Afternoon at physical therapy. True to her calendar, she arrived at Miller Rehab Center by 3. Rose grimaced through leg lifts while Teddy counted reps. The therapist beamed. Your grandma's a legend, outpaced 2 people half her age. Grace clapped. Rose, sweating, quipped, pain us just regret leaving the body. They reviewed discharge goals. Teddy fetched water. Grace knelt to adjust Rose's ankle weights. Their eyes met. You fought for me again, Rose said low. And for myself, Grace replied. Feels good. Rose touched her cheek. Second chances always do. Cafe conversation. After feet, Jonah drove them to Cafe Estrella, Rose's treat to celebrate Walker graduation. Hot churros arrived, dusted in cinnamon sugar. Teddy devoured too. Conversation drifted. Rose asked Jonah about his boxing gym youth program. He explained they'd lost funding for new gloves. Grace listened, gears turning. To replace gear, what is the cost? She asked. $2,000 covers gloves and headgear, he said. She typed a note on her phone. Consider it done. Company community grant. Jonah's eyes widened. Grace, I didn't bring it up for. You serve kids. It aligns with our new youth initiatives. She sipped her latte. Under the table, their knees brushed. Electricity zipped through her like a plucked harp string. She pretended to concentrate on napkins. Sidewalk serenade. Evening bled pastel over city rooftops when they left the cafe. A street violinist played Love I and Rose. Teddy dropped coins into the case. The musician winked, switched seamlessly into Danny Boy. Rose gasped, tears pooling. Grace wrapped an arm around her. Jonah observed them, a tableau of grief and hope, and something in his chest cracked open. When the song ended, he tipped his cap to the violinist and extended his elbow to Rose. Shall we? She took it. They danced a slow circle on the sidewalk, her crutch tucked under one arm. Jonah leaned carefully. Passersby applauded. Teddy cheered. Grace recorded on her phone, eyes stinging. In that moment, the CEO realized second chances warranty corporate memos. They were sidewalk waltzes, blueberry pancakes, unsanctioned pianos, and a driver whose smile felt like home. Confession on 4 wheels. Jonah dropped Rose and Teddy off home, then pulled into a quiet riverside lot. Fog hovered over the water, distant horns sounded like night birds. Everything okay? Grace asked. Jonah shifted to park, hands gripping the wheel. I am breaking protocol. But Grace, you re-changing lives, including mine, when you fight for Rose. For those kids at my gym, it reminds me why I took this job, to see leaders worth following. Blood pounded in her ears. Jonah. He turned, eyes gentle. I also know lines exist, boss employee. He shrugged lightly. But life is short, and I do regret not telling you remarkable. She breathed. Years of boardroom armor felt too heavy to lift. And yeah, I am tired of lines, she confessed. They kept me safe, but they kept me alone. She reached, laid her hand over his. Warmth coursed between them. A beat of silence. Then he covered her hand with his other. Squeezed gently. No hurried declarations, just acknowledgement. Seeds of rumor. Monday dawned with headlines lauding Whitaker Enterprises' progressive benefits. But not everyone applauded. Adler convened select shareholders, whispering about CEO impropriety, favoritism toward a janitor's family, questionable closeness with staff driver, fiscal recklessness. By midweek, a business blog published an anonymous leak. Whitaker's widow has the city's toughest CEO gone soft, and at what cost? The article referenced late-night trips to unknown addresses, insinuated Grace traded corporate focus for personal charity. The board demanded clarification. Rain lashed windows as Grace entered the special session. Adler sat smug at the head. Copies of the article lay on the table. He opened. Investors need assurance your judgment isn't compromised by emotional entanglements. Grace assessed the faces, some sympathetic, others wary. She inhaled. 2 weeks ago, she began, a child showed me our tallest walls are invisible. She recounted Teddy's arrival, Rose's fall, her grandfather's memory. She disclosed the childcare pilot, the scholarship fund, the lobby music appointment. As for rumors, she said, voice steady, I will not apologize for visiting an employee in rehab or supporting a driver's youth program. If that unravels your confidence, I invite you to vote your conscience. But remember, companies without conscience eventually lose more than revenue, they lose relevance. She sat, A hush, then Harper spoke. My daughter works nights. If Whitaker didn't help with childcare, she'd quit. She turned to Adler. Are we voting against families now? Another director chimed in. Scholarship story is viral on Twitter. Positive brand reach is up 37%. One by one, support solidified. Adler's cheeks reddened. He moved to table. Further discussion carried. The meeting adjourned with Grace still at the helm. Cathedral of Sound. That Friday, Whitaker Tower's marble lobby hosted its first midday concert. A gleaming baby grand waited beneath chandeliers. News crews lined the mezzanine. Employees spilled from elevators. Rose, in burgundy dress and low heels, took the piano bench. Grace, Jonah, Teddy, Iris, and Mrs. Patel formed a front row huddle. CFO Adler lurked near the coffee bar, arms crossed. Rose addressed the crowd. I once mopped these floors. Today I fill them with music this company placed back in my hands. May every note remind us none of us are just one thing. She began Rhapsody in Blue. Keys thundered, trilled, soared. The lobby transformed into a cathedral of sound. People who'd never spoken exchanged smiles. Janitors in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder with execs in Armani. Midway through, Rose modulated into Danny Boy. Gasps rippled, eyes shone. Grace felt Jonah's hand brush hers. She laced fingers through his. No hiding, no lines. At the last chord, applause erupted, a wave echoing up 40 stories of marble and glass. Rose stood bowed. Tears streaked Teddy's cheeks. Iris hugged her mother. Photographer snapped. Proposal of purpose. Afterward, Grace guided Rose to a high-table reception. Mimosas linked. Reporters requested interviews. Jonah stepped aside for air. Grace followed, finding him near the fountain. Water hissed, muffling lobby noise. She touched his elbow. Walk with me. They strolled toward the terrace. Snow lingered on stone planters. The city glittered like sequins. Ivy replayed our riverfront talk. Jonah said quietly. Lines are no lines. I am here. Grace halted. Her heart galloped. I am too, she answered. He smiled, slow and sure. Then we'll figure the rest out. He offered his hand. She took it. Behind them, through glass, Rose began an encore. Debussy's Clair de Lune. Notes floated into the cold evening, wrapping them in silver threads. Grace leaned into Jonah's shoulder, eyes on the horizon. Second chances were not loud. They were piano arpeggios slipping through corporate atriums. Children mopping floors out of love. Tulips brightening hospital rooms. Hands joined against Chicago wind. She'd chased skyscrapers for 20 years and found her summit here. Feet firmly on the terrace ground, heart expanded beyond steel and spreadsheets. She whispered, almost inaudible beneath the music, begin again. Jonah answered every day. Epilogue of the chapter. That night, Teddy FaceTimed Grace to show her the new gloves delivered to Jonah's gym, scarlet and gold. Whitaker colors. Dozens of kids punched the heavy bag behind him. Laughter ricocheting off brick walls. Looks like a world title camp, Grace joked. Teddy grinned wide. Jonah says I start lessons Monday. Better stretch, she advised. As the call ended, Grace sat at her writing desk, journal open. Entry: I once thought legacy was measured in square footage and quarterly dividends. Today I saw it measured in piano chords and borrowed courage. I am not less of a CEO for leading with heart. I am finally the kind my mother hoped I'd be. She closed the journal, set her phone on Do Not Disturb, and picked up a cardstock invitation waiting beside the lamp. It read Community Gala honoring Rose Wilson Whitaker Scholars, date March 22. Venue Art Institute Grand Hall. Under dress code it stated simply come as you are, but come ready to love louder. Grace smiled, placed the invite in her day planner, and headed to the kitchen to experiment with cocoa marshmallows included. Lumps forbidden because Monday afternoon, Teddy would insist on taste testing. A second chance, she reflected, is less about correction and more about expansion, making room for all the people you once didn't see. She opened the fridge, reached for milk, and felt the cathedral of sound still humming inside her chest. End of chapter. The CEO's second chance. A Monday storm announced itself with a low sky rumble that shook the windows of Whitaker Tower and rattled more than one executive's patience. Grace Whitaker stood in her corner office, watching clouds muscle across Lake Michigan like bruisers spoiling for a fight. She recognized the metaphor the moment it formed: storms outside, storms inside, and decided she didn't much care for it. Still, she exhaled, rolled her shoulders, and turned from the glass. On her desk lay the morning's agenda, but the real business of the day had nothing to do with bullet points. Word was, a faction of the board egged on by CFO Raymond Adler planned to call a confidential vote of no confidence. Too much empathy, they claimed. Too much spending on things that didn't come with immediate ROI. In other words, too much heart. Grace's assistant, Elena, slipped in without knocking and agreed upon signal that something urgent awaited. Miss Whitaker, she whispered, your 9 o'clock pre-brief with legal has been cancelled. Council says the committee moved up its closed session to 8:30. You re-requested at 8:50 sharp. So the whispers had officially made their way onto letterhead. Grace thanked her, powered down her laptop, and placed a single tulip today's color, soft orange, into the slim vase Rose had given her. Ritual complete. She left the office, heels clicking like distant hailstones on the marble floor. Conference room Aurora had looked grand during Rose's impromptu concert, but sealed for a closed meeting it felt more like an aquarium with predatory fish circling behind its glass walls. Grace entered to find 10 board members at the table, half-drunk lads and digital tablets glowing like small campfires before them. Harper, the coup, offered a nod of solidarity. Adler, seated dead center, offered nothing but the tight smile of a man who thinks the chessboard has finally turned in his favor. Miss Whitaker, Adler began before she had fully sat. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. Spontaneity keeps us young, Raymond, she replied. A light ripple of amusement ran down one side of the table. He cleared his throat. We've received communications from several institutional investors, Gilead Partners, Blue Crest Capital, and Vanguard Heritage Fund expressing concern over recent unscheduled expenditures and what they describe as mission drift. They question whether leadership remains focused on core competencies. Grace folded her hands. Mission drift, our mission rediscovery, there's a difference. Adler tapped his tablet and the room's main screen lit up with a bar graph benefit costs phones. Up $3.02 million. Emergency childcare, scholarship pilot, community grants. These are noble. They are also expensive. Heritage Fund emailed at 6 a.m. asking why EBITDA margin dropped 30 basis points. Harper leaned forward. 30 points is well within tolerance given supply chain spikes and last quarter SRD acceleration. Adler ignored her. Today we need clarity, Grace. Are your philanthropic priorities overshadowing fiduciary duty? Grace met his gaze. My duty is threefold: people, planet, profit. In that order, the founders made that explicit. Any imbalance isn't drifted as return to compass. Director Amelia Chun, a venture capitalist known for glare slow smiles, spoke next. No one disputes the ethics, Grace. The question is velocity. Change too fast and you scare the very capital that lets you expand good work later. Grace nodded. Fair point. Shall we look at velocity in context? She rose, connected her tablet, and replaced Adler's chart with another. It showed 2 lines: employee attrition and operating costs tied to turnover. The attrition line plunged after her benefits rollout costs followed. We resaving 7 figures in rehiring and retraining. Those dollars alone offset 60% of the new programs. Factor in increased productivity, and we break even by 3s. Murmurs. Someone scribbled notes. Adler frowned. Yet investor perception sags. Press labeled your leadership soft. Softness invites takeover bids. Grace clicked again. Brand sentiment analysis since Rose's concert. Positive mentions up 42%. Consumer trust up 18. Brand equity cushions market swings, she said. If Heritage Fund can translate community goodwill into long-term upside, that is their blind spot, not ours. Director Wyatt, who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. Let us not forget Ms. Whitaker's personal conduct. He slid a folder down the table. Inside, L-phone photos showed Grace leaving Logan Square Apartments, walking beside Jonah, distributing boxing gloves at the gym. Optics here blur professional boundaries. Grace kept her expression neutral. Helping staff isn't misconduct, nor is carpooling with my driver. Shuma's dark eyes assessed her. Tabloids spin narratives. Investors scare easily. Harper bristled. Are we policing kindness now? Adler raised a hand. No one is villainizing generosity, but unchecked, it muddies governance. Therefore, I motion we form a special oversight panel to vet any non-budgeted initiative exceeding $25,000. Additionally, the chair recommends evaluating Ms. Whitaker's employment agreement for potential amendments regarding conflict of interest. Wyatt seconded. Chun consented. Harper objected. Voices rose like the quivering metal of storm drains outside. Grace listened as if from a distance. When the room quieted, she stood once more. Before you vote, indulge a 5-minute story. Adler rolled his eyes but gestured go ahead. Grace began in 1998. My grandfather lay dying. Our caretaker was a woman whose hands smelled of lemon oil. She hummed hymns while changing his sheets. That woman was Rose Wilson. 24 years later, she was still humming, this time while scrubbing our bathrooms at 4 a.m. If you think brand value comes solely from product lines, remember this: the public's first viral photo of Whitaker Tower in 5 years won a new patent. It was a 71-year-old janitor bringing half the city to tears at a piano. That is value no algorithm foresaw. She let the sentence breathe. So create your panel if you must. But be honest about the substance. Fear masquerading as prudence. I refuse to lead from fear. Silence. Raindrops pattered the glass like pennies. Director Nguyen finally spoke. Raymond, until hard data contradicts Ms. Whitaker's, I see no basis for punitive oversight. I say we monitor quarterly. A vote followed. The panel proposal fell 6-4. Conflict of interest review tabled indefinitely. Adler's jaw flexed. Grace offered a cordial nod. Meeting adjourned. Chair scraped. Hallway undercurrents. Harper caught up with Grace near the elevator. Nice parry. But Adler is not finished. I know. Grace pressed the call button. Storms circle until they exhaust themselves or meet mountains. You feeling mountainous? Harper teased. A whole range. The doors opened. Grace descended toward lobby, phone buzzing non-stop, congratulatory texts from mid-level managers who heard whispers, an emoji bouquet from Iris, and a string of cheering gifts from Teddy. But one text, unknown number, stopped her scroll. We have the files. Think carefully before next move. G. No context. Just the letter G. Grace's stomach tightened. Rain and reckoning. By lunchtime the storm hit full throttle. Sheets of water blurred the skyline. Thunder shook the cupola. Grace stared at the cryptic message and considered possibilities. Gilead Partners, Goldberg Media, or maybe G for Gilead as CEO. Grant Foster, known for leveraged buyouts that gutted companies. She summoned its security. Any unusual network activity. Chief Information Security Officer Maya Singh reported increased ping attempts on her databases. None successful yet. Grace briefed legal. Contingency plans spun up like turbines. The leak. At 3:07 p.m., Whitaker cover-up trended on Twitter. An anonymous account posted what appeared to be manipulated spreadsheets showing deferred comp liabilities triple their actual value. Caption: Whitaker bleeds cash while CEO funds pet projects. Grace's phone erupted. Reporters called. TVision anchors requested statements. Stock dipped 4% in an hour. Adler capitalized. He emailed the board demanding an emergency night session to protect shareholders. Rose's counsel. Grace nearly skipped her 4:30 hospital visit, but some instincts trumped crisis. She found Rose an outpatient physio, coaxing elderly patients through scales on a portable keyboard, music as metronome for leg lifts. When therapy ended, Grace pulled her aside, voice hushed. Someone is faking numbers to smear us. Rose patted the chair next to her. Sit. Grace did. Rain drummed the windows. Rose said, storms chase tall trees. That's physics. But trees survive by flexing, not by towering stiff. Bend where you can, root where you must. Grace smiled despite nerves. Is that from a hymn? From mopping floors during tornado warnings, Rose replied. Find your root. Grace, the rest is weather. Grace inhaled, the scent of antiseptic and sheet music mingling. Her root truth. People, planet, profit, in that order. She thanked Rose, texted Jonah to collect Teddy, and returned to the tower ready for round 2. Digging for shovels. Harper and Maya met her in the 38th floor data center. Singh's team traced the fake docs to a spoofed internal account, Radler Finance. Close enough to Adler to raise suspicion. Further digital breadcrumbs lead to an external cloud folder accessed under a Gilead Partners IP range. Evidence compiled. Grace drafted a one-page summary and sent it to every board member. Timing delivery exactly 8 minutes before the 8 p.m. emergency session. Night of reckoning. Aurora felt colder under fluorescent light. Adler began, voice grave. The market reaction indicates catastrophic trust erosion. The chair should consider stepping back until an independent audit. Shun interrupted, holding up her tablet. Raymond, care to explain why a spreadsheet doctored from Urologian shows up on Gilead as servers? Adler's eyes widened. I was hacked. Nia nodded slowly. Funny how the hackers also mirrored your hidden column structure. Highly specific skill for criminals. Harper stepped in, motioned to suspend Mr. Adler pending forensic review. Wyatt, usually apathetic, slapped the table. Second. Vote 8-1. Adler alone voted no. Security escorted him out. Protests echoing down the hall. Grace remained silent until the door clicked shut. Then she addressed the room. We all want Whitaker strong. Strength built on deceit collapses. Strength built on roots people. Planet profit endures. Let us endure. Meeting adjourned, but the tremor lingered. Aftershocks and alignments. Harper joined Grace by the lobby fountain. Water glowed blue under recessed lights. That was surgical. Truth did the cutting, Grace replied. You realize stakeholders will still worry about leadership void in finance. Grace nodded. Interim CFO by Friday. Who? Someone whose resume includes community bank rotations and nonprofit audits, balance sheet, and heart. Harper grinned. I think this company just found its new rhythm. Drive home. Jonah waited curbside, headlights reflecting raindrops like scattered diamonds. Grace slid into the back seat. Exhaustion settled on her shoulders like a lead cape. Jonah studied her via the mirror. Storm pass. I bet maybe. He pulled from the curb. Silence reigned until he asked, "Where to?" "Logan Square," she answered. "I need to hear a lullaby from the only CFO I truly trust." He chuckled. Rose's piano and Teddy's off-key harmonies. As the car cruised, the storm finally broke, clouds shedding their last tears. By the time they reached Rose's block, the rain had stopped. Street lights shimmered off slick asphalt, and the city exhaled steam like something newly baptized. Grace climbed the stairs, Jonah behind her. Inside, Iris practiced speech notes for the upcoming gala. Teddy dozed on the couch, comic book spread across his chest. Rose, in slippers, tapped gentle chords on the keyboard. Claire de Lune, slow and hushed. She looked up. "You weathered it?" Grace nodded, throat too tight for words. Rose shifted to a major key, something triumphant. Jonah took Grace's coat. Iris poured tea. Teddy stirred awake, saw Grace and whispered, "Still CEO?" "Still CEO," she confirmed. He smiled, shut his eyes, and drifted back. Grace sat beside Rose. Together they watched rainwater slide down the window, each droplet racing another. "Storms," she mused, "aren't enemies, they clear the air." Rose murmured, "Tree still standing?" Roots held. She laid her head on Rose's shoulder, listening to the music. Jonah's quiet footsteps in the kitchen, Iris humming lines of her speech. Teddy breathing deep. Outside, clouds parted. A sliver of moon appeared, pale, stubborn, resilient. Grace smiled at its fragile glow and knew tomorrow as headlines would scream, "Scandal averted. CFO suspended, stock bounce." But here, in this living room smelling of chamomile and second chances, another headline mattered more. Family strengthens CEO as corporation catches its breath. The whispers in the boardroom had grown loud, but love, played in fortissimo, had drowned them out. End of chapter. Whispers in the boardroom. The Cook County Juvenile Court building looked more like a relic than a place where destinies hung in the balance, its limestone facade soot-stained, its brass doors engraved with a fading scale of justice. Still, inside those walls every weekday hopes rose and crashed like waves against a breakwater. On this Tuesday, the swell belonged to Rose Wilson and her grandson Teddy, but the undertow had a name: Daniel Hartman. Hartman had resurfaced in March, 4 months after Rose's fall and her unexpected promotion to artist-in-residence. A certified letter announced his petition for reinstatement of parental rights and primary custody of Theodore Hartman Wilson. His argument was textbook. He destabilized, held a job at a suburban car dealership, and completed a 6-week parenting seminar. What the petition left out, of course, was his criminal record: 2 DOIs, unpaid back child support for another child in Iowa, and a sealed but notorious disorderly conduct plea. What it hinted at, but never said outright, was money, specifically Grace Whitaker's money, which tabloids now linked often falsely to Rose's every move. Grace found out the same hour Rose did. She'd been finishing a proposal when Iris burst into her office, waving papers. "He filed," Iris panted. Grace read the name Hartman and felt her stomach drop like an express elevator. Memories of her own parents' custody dispute flashed, voices echoing in marble courtrooms. The helplessness of a child asked to choose sides. It was a memory she'd buried deep, yet here it stood on her glossy mahogany desk. "We'll fight," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "Can Whitaker's legal team?" Iris began. "Already dialed," Grace promised. Pretrial trenches. Grace hired Angela Serrano, a family law attorney with a reputation for turning courtroom floors into minefields for deadbeat dads. Serrano's first move: emergency motion to maintain the status quo, Teddy with Rose until full hearing. Judge Margot Levin granted it but scheduled evidentiary proceedings just 4 weeks out. "Children deserve resolution," Levin said. Translation: buckle up. The timetable was brutal. Serrano smiled like a wolf offered raw steak. In the weeks leading to court, Rose balanced rehab exercises, lobby concerts, and depositions. Therapist sessions built stamina, piano built calm, legal prep built a storm in her veins. She relived Lily's overdose, the dusty social worker interviews, the day she signed guardianship papers. Each retelling sabbed over, then ripped anew. At night, Teddy crawled into her bed, sensing tension. He called T name. Grace organized war rooms, one at Whitaker Tower, another in Rose's apartment. Whiteboards mapped timelines, phone records, medical charts. Jonah chauffeured investigators across state lines to collect affidavits. Harper quietly ensured Whitaker Enterprises' her calendar accommodated Rose's every hearing. No talk of pto. This was purpose time. Meanwhile, tabloids feasted: janitor grandma versus birth father, corporate queenbacks underdog. Paparazzi parked outside Rose's building. Iris nearly punched a photographer who lunged at Teddy with a zoom lens. Grace responded by hiring 2 retired ET officers for discreet protection. The courtroom. April 19 arrived cold and clear. Branch 4 buzzed with bailiffs, clerks, and the restless shuffle of litigants. Rose wore a navy suit Grace had tailored from one of her own vintage pieces. Teddy had insisted on gifting Grandma his lucky Superman pin. She wore it just inside the lapel. Daniel Hartman entered flanked by a slim attorney in an ill-fitting charcoal suit. Hartman's eyes darted, predator scanning or prey panicking, hard to say. He avoided Teddy's gaze. Judge Levin took the bench at 9:03 a.m., mid-50s. Salt and pepper curls, reputation for zero patience with theatrics. Let us move, she said, banging the gavel once. Opening salvos. Hartman's counsel went first. Mr. Hartman, now clean and employed, merely requests his constitutional right to parent. Ms. Wilson, elderly and recovering from injury, cannot physically match a father's energy. He cited Illinois statutes and waved a doctor's note stating Rose should avoid extended lifting. Serrano rose, crisp red blazer slicing the air. Opposing counsel forgets custody centers on the child's best interest, not an absentee parent's whim. She pointed to Hartman's history. His banishing act during Lily's pregnancy, unpaid child support, and new twist definitive proof he'd been emailing a Gilead Partners junior analyst about monetizing the Whitaker connection. Levin's eyebrow arched. The analyst's deposition admitted into evidence. Quoted Hartman, Kid's golden CEO is soft. Gasps rippled. Hartman shifted, sweat beading. Evidence in cross. Serrano called Rose first. Rose's cane clicked as she approached. She swore in, hands steady. Serrano's questions painted a portrait: daily routines, school involvement, medical appointments, bedtime stories set to piano lullabies. Rose spoke firmly but without embellishment. When asked about her hip, she tapped the floor with the cane. Doctors cleared me for unrestricted activity last week. I can lift Teddy's backpack just fine, Your Honor. Cross-examination tried to trap her. Isn't it true you nearly lost your job before the CEO intervened? Rose met Hartman's lawyer squarely. I didn't nearly lose it. I took sick leave as entitled, and Ms. Whitaker intervened in compassion, not charity. Is your livelihood dependent on Ms. Whitaker's favor? My livelihood depends on my ability and my employer's policy. Favor's got nothing to do with mopping or Mozart. The courtroom chuckled. Levin didn't hide a grin. Next, Serrano called Grace. Whispers buzzed as the CEO took oath. She detailed her history with Rose, the care for her grandfather, Teddy's night in the tower, Whitaker's community programs. Serrano leaned in. Ms. Whitaker, do you intend to adopt Teddy? Grace glanced at Rose, then the judge. Only if Rose could no longer care for him, an outcome neither of us foresees. Does Mr. Hartman have any contractual or employment relationship with Whitaker Enterprises? None. On cross, Hartman's attorney attempted to smear Ms. Whitaker. Tabloids call you corporate queen of compassion. Is this courtroom appearance just branding? Grace's voice dropped to a calm blade. Compassion isn't branding. It is business done right, and business is personal when children are involved. Levin overruled the next three objections from Hartman's counsel before the lawyer retreated. The child's voice. Per Illinois protocol, the judge interviewed Teddy in chambers with a childhood vote present. Behind closed doors, Teddy tie crooked, I saw him told Judge Levin about Saturday pancakes, Grandma's lullabies, comic books with Jonah, and how Mr. Daniel once promised a bike but never showed. Asked where he felt safe, he answered, where love is louder. That is with Grandma Rose. When Levin inquired about Grace, Teddy's face lit. She plays wrong notes on purpose to make me laugh. Levin smiled. Interview done. The rebuttal. Hartman took the stand mid-afternoon. His attorney coached him to appear humble. But under Serrano's cross-examination, bravado leaked. When asked why he vanished during Lily's pregnancy, Hartman blamed youthful fear. Serrano pressed fear-prevented phone calls, child support, birthday cards. Hartman stammered. She then unveiled traffic footage from 2 months prior. Hartman leaving a bar at 1:22 a.m. Staggering. Blood alcohol level. Lawyer objected. Footage timeframe post-dated his last mandated test. Undermining sobriety claim. Objection overruled. Jurorless family court still weighed credibility. Hartman's tanked. Closing arguments. Hartman's counsel. Redemption is American as baseball. Don't punish a father forever. Serrano. Redemption cannot rent a child like a lottery ticket. Teddy is thriving. School S. Stable home. Consistent health care. To uproot him now is harm, not redemption. The law protects children from such gambles. Judge's ruling. Levin recessed 10 minutes, then returned. The courtroom's air thickened. In reviewing evidence, she began. The court observes Mr. Hartman's late interest coincides with Ms. Wilson's improved economic circumstances. Motive matters. Conversely, Ms. Wilson's proven dedication predates any financial upswing. Teddy's testimony confirms a bond rooted in stability and affection. She paused, gaze sweeping the room. Petition for primary custody by Mr. Hartman is denied. Ms. Wilson retains sole guardianship. Supervised visitation may be petitioned after 1 consecutive year of documented sobriety and child support compliance. Gavel. Applause erupted, then died under bailiff glare. Rose exhaled a sob. Grace clasped her shoulders. Teddy, who'd waited with Jonah in the corridor, burst in. We won, he asked. Rose knelt pain-forgotten to hug him. We won, baby, we won. Aftermath hallways. Hartman brushed past reporters, face blotchy. Grace noticed he avoided her gaze, not shame, but calculation. This was retreat, not surrender. Serrano advised they file a protective order. Grace nodded. Outside, cameras flashed. Serrano held a brief presser. Today's ruling affirms that parenthood is responsibility, not biology. Ms. Wilson and her grandson will continue thriving thanks to a community that values love. Grace stood behind her, Rose at her side. Teddy perched on one of Grace's stylish but durable heels, both waving. Drive into sunset. Jonah steered them toward Logan Square. Car windows rolled down. Spring air carried hints of lilac. Teddy tattered, imagining a superhero named Captain Courtroom whose power was truth. Rose laughed to sound like piano pedals releasing. Grace's phone buzzed. Harper texting a photo of Whitaker stock rebounding. She silenced it, choosing the scene inside the car over market ticks. At a red light, Jonah reached back to fist bump Teddy. Grace watched their hands meet, brown and pale, calloused and small. A community, she realized, is built exactly like that, hands meeting despite everything. Epilogue of the chapter. That night, neighbors filled the hallway again, this time with balloons and sheet cakes. Someone brought a boombox. Rose's keyboard accompanied an impromptu dance party. Iris toasted to Grandma Rose, the only woman I know who can turn a courtroom into a concert hall. Laughter, glasses clinked. Later, when quiet settled, Rose found Grace on the fire escape. City lights blinking, they sat shoulder to shoulder. You okay? Rose asked. Grace nodded. Today closed one loop, many left. Rose squeezed her hand. Loops close easier when hearts stay open. Grace smiled, thinking of storms, bored whispers, and little boys in superhero pins. And when love talks louder. From inside, Teddy called, Grandma, play We Are the Champions. Rose rolled her eyes affectionately, rose, and headed in. Grace followed. Heartbeat steady, certain of one truth: some victories are private, some in living rooms under string lights. But they renew the world just the same. End of chapter. A courtroom stand. Spring crawled into Chicago like a bashful guest. First a hint of warmth on the lake breeze. Then a scattered bloom of rap apple trees along Michigan Avenue. And finally, full sunlight that coaxed winter-rusted hearts into patios, parks, and open windows. For Grace Whitaker, the season felt less like weather change and more like an inside-out transformation. The courtroom victory had lifted a weight she didn't know she carried. But what followed wasn't a lull, it was a surge, a current pulling everyone in her orbit towards something larger than any one of them could have built alone. 1. A blueprint over breakfast. The Monday after the custody win, Rose hosted a pancake breakfast for the Whitaker entourage, an ever-shifting cluster of neighbors, lawyers, execs, and kids who now considered apartment 3 a second home. Grace arrived first, balancing 2 cartons of fresh strawberries and a binder labeled Dream Builder Tasks. Jonah came next with coffee from the Greek diner down the block. Serrano popped in to drop off finalized custody papers. Iris, always the unofficial event planner, carried a grocery bag stuffed with tablecloths and scented candles. No such thing as too festive, she declared. Teddy answered the door wearing an apron that read Chef in Training. Password? He asked, arms crossed. Grace leaned down. Love louder. Entry granted, he said, swinging the door wide. Inside, the small kitchen smelled of vanilla and sizzling butter. Rose commanded the griddle with the grace of a symphony conductor, flipping perfect golden circles while humming Rhapsody in Blue. Her cane rested against the fridge. Rarely needed these days. They ate at the fold-out table, knees knocking, laughter rising. Halfway through second helpings, Grace opened her binder. Okay, team, she began, formal but sparkling. We have 3 deadlines. First, the Whitaker Scholars Gala in 8 weeks. Second, launch of the Cornerstone Community Center in 6 months. And third, Rose's debut album before Christmas. Rose nearly choked on syrup. Album. 4 tracks, Grace clarified. Recorded live in the lobby studio we rebuilding downstairs. Studio, Rose echoed wide-eyed. Teddy bounced. Can I play triangle? Jonah raised a hand. I call tambourine. Laughter erupted. Grace tapped the table. I am serious. We have momentum. People are listening. Let us give them a soundtrack. Iris flipped to a clean page in her planner. First gala committee meets Friday. Venue: the Art Institute Grand Hall already secured. Theme? Teddy suggested superheroes in suits. Rose chuckled. Maybe something broader. Sugar. Grace scribbled. What about building dreams together? It captures scholarships. The new center, the album, even this breakfast. Heads nodded. Title sealed. 2. The Cornerstone idea. Cornerstone Community Center was Grace's audacious post-truckle baby, a refurbished factory space on the west side repurposed into a multi-level hub, music education classrooms, coding labs, a boxing gym for Jonah's kids, and an after-school cafe managed by neighborhood teens. She'd quietly purchased the property months earlier but kept it under wraps, waiting to see if her board would implode under Adler's sabotage. With that crisis averted, she felt free to dream loudly. She toured the building that afternoon with Rose, Teddy, Jonah, and Harper. Rust flaked from massive support beams, pigeons cooed in rafters, yet sunlight slanted through broken skylights, illuminating possibilities like spotlights on a bare stage. "This smells like old tires," Teddy observed, scrunching his nose. Rose rested a hand on his shoulder. "Sweetheart, some dreams start smelling worse than old tires. Then you air them out." Grace pointed upward. "Replace skylights with solar panels. Soundproof the east wing for music rooms. West side becomes the gym." Jonah whistled. "Never thought I'd see boxing bags hanging next to violins." "Exactly," Grace said. "Intersection over isolation." Harper referenced her clipboard. "Permit submitted. Construction bids due next week. City zoning loves the nonprofit angle, should fast track." They walked the perimeter. Graffiti ghosts whispered from brick walls. Rose tested acoustics with a hum. The note lingered, multiplied. "Hear that?" she said, eye shining. "This place already sings." 3. A shift in perspective. Back at Whitaker Tower, Grace climbed to the roof garden, her private refuge where a single teak bench overlooked the city. Jonah found her there after evening chauffeur duties, approaching quietly so as not to startle. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She scooted over, offering half the bench. City lights glittered below like scattered sequins. For a minute neither spoke. Wind tousled Grace's hair. Jonah tucked a loose strand behind her ear. "Impulsive. Gentle." She didn't flinch. "I keep thinking about velocity," she murmured. "The board's word?" She nodded. "I've spent years racing numbers. Now I am racing purpose. Feels faster." Jonah smiled. "Purpose is light. Light moves at 186.0 miles per second. She turned to face him. "You all run with me?" His eyes answered before his words did. "Every mile." Her hand found his fingers, laced effortless. Overhead, a red-eye flight carved across stars. Another journey underway. 4. The mentorship match. One April morning, Harper reported that 6 high school seniors from South and West Side neighborhoods had been selected as inaugural Whitaker Scholars. Each would receive tuition, a laptop, and a summer internship. But Grace wanted more. "Pair them with mentors," she said at a leadership huddle. "Real ones. Not ceremonial lunches." Harper smirked. "Volunteers. Draft people who need mentoring as much as mentees," Grace replied. I slid toward junior managers craving meaning beyond spreadsheets. Pairings formed like unexpected duets: a shy marketing assistant with a budding poet, a veteran accountant with a gaming obsessed coder, and, to everyone's surprise, Grace with a 17-year-old named Maya Williams, daring, outspoken, cello prodigy. First meeting, Maya challenged, "So you read the famous CEO. What is your biggest failure?" Grace blinked, then laughed. "Starting mentorship by flipping the script. I like it." She confessed missteps, ignoring family, chasing profit. Maya responded by confessing stage fright. They set goals. Grace would practice vulnerability speeches. Maya would perform one solo at the gala. 5. Rose in the studio. Downstairs, lobby renovations included installation of glass-walled studio art for Rose. The first time she stepped inside, she traced the baby grand's polished edge like meeting an old friend. Audio engineers adjusted levels as she warmed up with scales, through glass. Passing employees paused to watch, reverence etched on faces that once rushed by her mop bucket. Recording began with Claire de Lune. Mid-take, Rose stopped, shaking her head. "That's memory, not music," she said. "I want the living version." She closed her eyes, pictured Lily's smile, Teddy's laugh, Grace's rooftop resolve. Fingers returned to keys. This time, notes carried the weight and lift of every chapter since her injury. The room fell silent after the last chord. The engineer whispered, "I think we can skip a second take." 6. A boxing ring of possibility. Jonah's side of the dream took shape in the factory's west wing. He and Teddy spent Saturdays laying tape on the concrete where rings would stand. Kids from his gym came by to help, rolling mats, painting walls navy and white. One girl, 13-year-old Leela, confessed she'd dropped out of school. Jonah asked Rose to play background tunes while they worked music. He claimed made tough stories softer. Grace visited during one session, arriving just as Leela practiced jabs. Jonah explained her situation. Grace knelt to meet Leela's eyes. "Cornerstone will have tutors. Stick with us, we'll stick with you." Leela shrugged, tough veneer cracking. "Maybe." Later, Leela asked Teddy how to read music. He traded her a quick boxing combo for a major scale. They giggled, exchanging gloves for sheet music. From across the space, Jonah and Grace locked eyes, exactly the integration they'd imagined. 7. Breaking news and barriers. Local media followed every development, but national attention came unexpectedly when a TikTok of Rose teaching a custodian how to play chopsticks went viral. 15 million views in 3 days. Comments flooded. "When is the album? Where is the charity link?" Harper's PR team launched a microsite within 24 hours, donations pouring into fund Cornerstone. Gilead Partners attempted another smear, issuing a press release claiming Whitaker diverted resources for vanity philanthropy. But this time investors rallied behind Grace. Consumer advocacy groups praised the transparency. Stock ticked up 2 points. Harper emailed urgency over "Purpose wins." Grace replied with a single tulip emoji. 8. Gala countdown. 6 weeks pre-gala, Iris hosted dress fittings in Rose's apartment. Grace wore an emerald gown with a plunging back power and poetry. Iris declared. Rose chose a silver sheath, elegant but functional for piano. Teddy donned a miniature tux, fist pumping in the mirror. Jonah slipped in late, suit jacket slung over shoulder. He and Grace shared a glance that spoke chapters comfort in public, intimacy in quiet spaces. Iris noticed, arching an approving brow. Meanwhile, Maya texted Grace need pep talk, stage fright rising. Grace invited her to Studio R. They sat at the grand. Close your eyes, Grace instructed. Play the first note like you retelling a secret to someone you trust. Maya did, cello singing low. They practiced breath between phrases, Grace counting, Maya nodding. When finished, Maya exhaled. Less scared, she admitted. Grace high-fived her. 9. Unexpected obstacle. 3 weeks before the gala, a construction accident at Cornerstone halted progress. A crane malfunction sent steel beams crashing. No injuries, but structural inspection halted permits. Insurance would cover, but delay threatened the grand opening timeline. Grace gathered the team in the factory smell of sawdust and failure. We adjust, she said. Harper proposed modular interiors that could be installed faster once clearance returned. Jonah's boxing ring frame, undamaged, became a staging area. Rose suggested hosting pop-up classes in neighborhood churches until doors opened. Teddy drew new schematics with colored pencils, arrows from church to library to community garden. Cornerstone as temporary satellites. Grace looked at the drawing. Mobile dreams, she whispered. We roll until we root. 10. A night of small triumphs. The evening before final structural reinspection, Grace invited the core crew to Whitaker's rooftop garden for pizza and stargazing. Blankets, string lights, portable speaker playing Rose's test masters. Maya thanked Rose for inspiring her to improvise adenzas. Leela showed Teddy a left hook improvement. Harper gifted Jonah a leather jump rope engraved run with purpose. Grace toasted to setbacks that redirect, mentors who multiply, and children who keep us honest. Glasses linked sparkling water, because tomorrow was big. Jonah pulled Grace aside, city lights painting his profile gold. You re-giving a lot. Make sure to keep a piece for you. She squeezed his hand. I already did, she said, pointing to him. To Rose, to the group. 11. Green light. Inspection passed. Construction resumed with double shifts. Volunteers joined employees, neighbors, even board members wielding paint rollers, in an image that would later grace the Chicago Tribune front page. Grace Whitaker, power suit swapped for overalls, guided a paint sprayer beside Leela. Both splattered teal. Headline: CEO puts color where her money is. 12. The gala. June 22 arrived warm and windless. The Art Institute Grand Hall shimmered under chandeliers. Tables draped in cobalt linens, centerpieces featuring single tulips, each one a nod to Rose's hospital blooms. A banner stretched above the stage building dreams together. Guests included city officials, investors, journalists, scholarship recipients, and janitorial staff. Grace insisted every department receive a ticket lottery. Harper eyed the diverse crowd, whispering to Grace, this just might rewrite gala etiquette. Grace answered about time. Proceedings began with Iris as MC. She told the tale: Teddy's midnight bus ride, Rose's spill of Claire de Lune, Grace's pivot from profit to purpose. Applause, sniffles, phone cameras raised. Then Maya stepped on stage, cello poised. She paused, scanning the hall, eyes locking on Grace. Inhale. First note a whisper, second bolder. Soon the hall filled with a piece she decomposed, Second Chances. When she ended, a standing ovation roared. Maya beamed, fear conquered. Next, Rose took the bench. She performed Love Louder, an original written with Teddy, who stood beside her, triangle at the ready. Final chord rang. Teddy struck the triangle, ding, igniting laughter and cheers. Grace delivered closing remarks. When we choose to build dreams together, we build futures none of us could imagine alone. Tonight isn't the end. It is the blueprint. She announced Cornerstone's October opening and unveiled a rendering on the giant screen, a luminous hub. Solar-penciled roof, murals of music notes entwined with boxing gloves. Donations pledged that night topped $8 million. 13. Dance floor declarations. Despun Motown. Grace danced with Teddy, who attempted moonwalks, then with Rose. Careful of hip but enjoying every swivel. Finally, Jonah extended a hand. As they swayed, he whispered, ready for our own cornerstone? She tilted her head. Define. He produced a tiny velvet box. Not a ring. Inside lay 2 silver key charms engraved Koyi. A place together, he explained. Whenever you ready. Her eyes glistened. I think I am. She kissed him, modest but real. Flashbulbs catching the moment. 14. Sunrise at Cornerstone. 3 months later, October leaves cluttered sidewalks. Cornerstone's doors opened to a crib on cutting by Teddy wielding safety scissors. Inside, kids darted from coding pods to drum circles. Leela, now back in school, taught newcomers boxing footwork. Maya volunteered cello lessons. Rose played in the cafe. Tips collected for scholarship fund. Grace walked the mezzanine with Harper. Remember velocity? Harper asked. Grace laughed. I think we re-cruising warp speed now. Jonah shouted from the ring. Grace, glove up. She descended, traded heels for sneakers, and joined a lights bar. Laughter echoed off freshly painted walls. 15. A night of quiet exhale. Later, Rose, Grace, and Teddy sat on the factory roof, now a garden lit by fairy lights. They shared hot cocoa. Grace mastered long-free recipe at last. Teddy swung his legs over the edge. Marvel blanket around shoulders. Grandma, what's next dream? He asked. Rose looked at Grace. Whatever we build together. Grace raised her mug to dreams with room for everyone. They blinked. Wind rustled leaves. City hummed. And somewhere down below, in freshly minted classrooms and rains, children discovered that possibility isn't a solitary path but a network of hands lifting, guiding, steadying, building dreams together. End of chapter. Building dreams together. Spring returned to Chicago with a confidence that bordered on dazzling. Riots of tulips flared along Michigan Avenue. Patio tables multiplied like hopeful seedlings, and gulls swooped over the lake as if choreographed by a hidden maestro. For Grace Whitaker, the season felt like her own reflection, vibrant, unexpected, alive. 1 year earlier, she demeasured life in quarterly reports and whispered regrets. Now she counted in piano chords, scholarship letters, and every new laugh line around Rose's eyes. Yet one promise remained unspoken, hovering like pollen in the air, an unfinalized commitment between a CEO who had learned softness and a chauffeur who had never demanded more than respect but offered everything in return. The moment would come. Chicago, as spring practically insisted. 1. The Secret Scout. Teddy Wilson, age 9, fancied himself part-time superhero, part-time detective, and full-time love ambassador. On a brisk April Saturday, he slipped from Cornerstone's coding lab and flagged Jonah down in the hallway. Phase velvet tulip is go, Teddy whispered, eyes shining. Jonah's eyebrow rose. Velvet tulip? Mom, I mean Ms. Grace likes tulips. Velvet means secret. Keep up, man. Jonah grinned. Enlighten me. Teddy produced a crayon map. X marked a lakeside gazebo in Lincoln Park. Around it, scribbled stick figures, one in a long dress, another with a driver-esque cap. You take her here at sunset. Grandma and I handle decorations. Jonah crouched. And if she suspects? Deniability, Teddy said, as though reading corporate policy. Just act normal. When she sees the setup, you do the Neil thing. The Neil thing? You know, like nights, our TikTok proposals. Jonah chuckled. You've thought of everything. Grandma says love plans louder. He saluted and scampered off, leaving Jonah clutching a map smelling faintly of glue sticks. 2. The Ring Dilemma. Later that afternoon, Jonah visited Delaney Sons Jewelers, established 1898, known for handcrafted settings. He'd saved for months, but Grace's taste leaned minimalist. He selected a simple platinum band inset with one oval sapphire, the same hue as the ring Grace once gave Rose in the park. Continuity, he murmured. Mr. Delaney polished the band and nodded approvingly. Sapphire speaks truth, he said. Jonah paid, heart thumping. Outside, spring sunlight bounced off the velvet box like permission. 3. A CEO's restless heart. That evening, Grace paced her penthouse, unable to settle. The past year spun through her mind: custody battles, board uprisings, concerts, community grants. Yet personal vows felt scarier than corporate mergers. She ran a bath, added lavender salts Rose had gifted, and tried to quiet the inner tremor. Her phone pinged Jonah photo of Teddy holding a world's best planned comic he'd drawn. Caption: tomorrow, sunset, dress comfy. A smile twitched her lips. Jonah seldom texted directives. Curiosity bloomed. 4. The grandmother's touch. Sunday morning, Rose arrived at Grace's apartment with Iris in tow. Claiming a ladies' brunch, they brought mimosas, croissants, and a garment bag. Grace frowned. You two have secrets on your faces. Hydrating masks, Iris deadpanned. Now sit. They styled her hair, soft waves pinned half up, and revealed the dress, ivory silk tea length with cap sleeves. Too bridal, Grace protested. Rose tapped her knee. It is apt for spring. Where are we going? A walk, Iris said, zipping the dress. Maybe more. Grace conceded, suspicion and anticipation mingling. 5. Jonah Esteter. At 4 p.m., Jonah retrieved Grace in the Lincoln. Teddy sat shotgun, conspicuously silent, hat twisted backward. Grace raised an eyebrow. Teddy shrugged, top secret. Jonah merged into Parkway traffic. Radio low. Ella Fitzgerald's April in Paris. Grace studied Jonah's profile, the calm concentration, the slight twitch at the edge of his mouth. You nervous, she observed. Optimistic, he corrected. They reached Lincoln Park's north entrance. Jonah parked. Teddy hopped out. Grabbed Grace's hand. Trust me. 6. Gazebo glow. The path curved through budding cherry trees until the gazebo emerged, laddied wood draped in white twinkle lights. Tulip bouquets tied to every post. Rose sat at an electric keyboard. Iris beside her adjusting sheet music. A dozen neighbors, students, board members formed a semiral. Maya tuned her cello. Even Harper and the new interim CFO attended. Holding hands, office gossip later confirmed a budding romance. Grace froze. Jonah's palm pressed her back gently. Teddy sprinted to Rose. High-fived her, then took a triangle from his pocket. Rose began to play lullaby in Rose, slow and swaying. Jonah stepped forward, guests parting. He faced Grace, eyes shining, time compressed. Wind stole breath. He knelt one knee in damp grass. Velvet box opened. Gasps and camera clicks faded behind the music. Grace Whitaker, he said, voice steady, you showed me that leadership isn't power but love. You built a world where janitors become artists and drivers dare to dream bigger. I want to drive every mile with you. Will you marry me? Tears pooled. Grace laughed, half sob, half delight. Stand up, she whispered. He did. She upped his face. Yes, 1,000 yeses. Applause thundered. Teddy hit his triangle ding. Perfect cue. Rose segued into Gershwin. Maya's cello soared. Harper wiped tears. Jonah slipped the sapphire ring onto Grace's trembling finger. She admired the stone. Going deep, then kissed him gentle at first, turning sure as cheers roared. 7. Vows under blossoms. The officiant Pastor Daniels, longtime friend of Rose, stepped forward unexpectedly. Seems ashamed to squander a gazebo dressed for vows, he said. Winked at Teddy. Grace laughed. Jonah's eyes widened. Guests murmured encouragement. Grace searched Jonah's face, question. He nodded certainty. Within minutes, rings were blessed. A simple vow script produced. Iris fashioned a bouquet from extra tulips. Harper found a ribbon for Jonah's pocket square. The world arranged itself. Pastor Daniels cleared his throat. Do you, Grace, promise to build a life where purpose and partnership thrive side by side? I do. Do you, Jonah, promise to navigate storms and sunshine with compassion as your compass? I do. Teddy, do you offer your blessing? Daniels asked. Teddy raised both thumbs. Absolutely. By the power vested in me here, among friends, blossoms, and new beginnings, I pronounce you partners in every sense. Kiss before the tulips wilt. They kissed again, laughter woven through. 8. Griepchen in basket. Picnic blankets appeared prepacked by Iris and Serrano. Baskets revealed finger sandwiches, sparkling grape juice, and Rose's famous strawberry shortcake. A Bluetooth speaker played a playlist assembled by Cornerstone Kids Motown to modern pop. Grace danced with Teddy to Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Jonah spun Maya in a goofy swing. Rose played medleys until her fingers tingled, then accepted a dance from Harper. Even Judge Levin attended, having been tipped off by Serrano, applauding from a bench. 9. Boardroom surprise. Monday morning, Grace arrived at Whitaker Tower wearing the sapphire band, greeting employees, receiving hugs. In an impromptu meeting, Harper announced the board had voted unanimous approval for integrating Cornerstone into Whitaker's official SIR portfolio. A congratulatory cake appeared, icing script. Congrats, Grace. Jonah, CFO, smiled, muttering, first time her processed a marriage into brand equity within 24 hours. Grace rolled her eyes, but warmth filled her chest. 10. Honeymoon Miro tour. Time off for a CEO is rare, but Harper insisted on at least a week. Grace suggested Paris. Jonah countered with a road trip along Route 66, America's Old Heart. He called it. They compromised 3 days in Santa Fe, Adobe. Then quick jaunt to Paris courtesy of Whitaker's carbon offset program. They returned with turquoise bracelets for Iris, lavender soap for Rose, and a signed Charlie Parker vinyl for Teddy, who discovered jazz sax. 11. The Cornerstone Wedding Fest. Because the gazebo vows were intimate, Cornerstone Kids demanded a public celebration. So a wedding fest was planned for the center's courtyard mid-May. Decor comic book banners drawn by students, Grace and Jonah as caped crusaders. Rose as maestro, Teddy as sidekick. Food trucks lined the street, empanadas, Jonah's recipe, gourmet cocoa, vegan cupcakes. Live sets rotated, Rose's band, Maya's string quartet, Leela a spoken word poem about punching through fear. Grace and Jonah renewed vows, this time reading original promises, hers about courage to slow down, his about sharing the driver a seat. They exchanged Cornerstone-made leather bracelets carved with the words love louder. As sunset flushed the courtyard gold, fireworks spelled Guji above the roof. Kids screamed delight, adults gasped. Grace caught Jonah's hand. Best branding ever, she teased. He laughed. Our marketing director is 9 and accepts payment in comic books. 12. Rose's letter. Weeks later, Grace found a lavender envelope on her desk. Inside. Dear Grace and Jonah, some music you play, some music plays you. Yesterday's vows were a symphony none of us wrote. Yeah, all of us performed. Keep conducting with kindness, tempo will follow. Remember, love louder isn't volume, it is presence. Forever grateful. Rose. Grace pinned the letter above her monitor. Whenever spreadsheets blurred, she'd reread it and breathe. 13. Boardroom to playroom. By July, Whitaker Tower's top floor included a playroom for employees' children. Teddy insisted on painting a mural city skyline morphing into giant tulips. With a Clemis and Turn spaceship soaring overhead, Grace and Jonah spent Saturday mornings helping, sneaking paint fights, leaving smudges on each other's noses. Press called it corporate whimsy, Grace corrected corporate humanity. 14. Legacy on the lake. Summer's first heat wave drove everyone lakeside. Grace and Jonah rented paddleboards with Teddy. Halfway out, Teddy wobbled, splashed into cold water. He surfaced laughing, hair plastered. Grace, Dove and Jonah followed. They floated Chicago's skyline, towering like a benevolent guardian. Teddy gazed upward. Feels like the city is hugging us. Grace smiled. Because we read part of its story now. 15. Epilogue 1 year later. A spring breeze rustled Cornerstone's rooftop garden. Rows of tulips swayed. Inside the event hall, the first class of Whitaker scholars prepared to graduate. Rose readied the anthem she decomposed for them. Begin again. Maya conducted the orchestra. Leela, now top of her boxing league and valedictorian, rehearsed her speech. Teddy, taller, tuned his trumpet. Grace adjusted interpieces, sapphire glinting under fairy lights. Jonah joined, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. He kissed her temple. Year 1, Mrs. Aberra Whitaker. She linked mugs to infinite years. Below, city lights blinked like Morse code. She no longer wondered what message they sent. She knew it was the same one carved on her bracelet. Echoed in every Cornerstone hallway, printed on scholarship diplomas, sung in Rose's melodies. Love louder. And in that vow spoken under spring blossoms, renewed daily in acts big and small, Grace and Jonah found not just a lifetime but a legacy, one that bloomed every April, as sure as tulips and second chances. End of chapter. Springtime vows.